your host today. We've got a fantastic panel coming your way. We're going to be talking about fintechs and the era of radical inclusivity, specifically leveling the playing field through user experience with our hosts and sponsors, CleverTap. I'd like to get things started by just introducing all of our panelists. So when I introduce you, take a moment, just introduce yourselves, tell a little bit about your background. We'll start with Parilee Edison Wang, joining us from Bread.
Hi, everybody. I'm Parilee Edison Wang. I'm the SVP of Product and Analytics at Bread Finance, a division of Alliance Data, and excited to be here speaking with you all today about this really important topic.
Excellent. Thank you, Parilee. And then our next panelist is Roy Simkhay, joining us from Petal.
Hi, everybody. I'm Roy Simkhay. I'm a VP of Product here at Petal. The topics of our panel today around inclusivity and leveling the playing field are really important to Petal's mission. So I'm excited to be here talking about this today.
Excellent. And then bringing us home, our final panelist is from CleverTap, Hwang, joining us, and of course, CleverTap sponsoring this one. So Eric, can you give us a quick introduction to yourself and tell us what CleverTap is all about?
Absolutely. Thank you. So I lead the solutions consultant team here at CleverTap. CleverTap is going to be a product marketing tool that allows you to really understand your users' behavior and really try to start to trigger notifications and really drive product changes based on those behavioral patterns that you're analyzing, right? So looking forward to talking about how data really drives some of this fintech inclusivity, right, and some of that product changes moving forward. But thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. So we've got a couple of interesting pieces already kind of out there. We're talking about inclusivity, we're talking about data, and of course, user experience. Let's kick things off by starting at a really high level, talking about what financial inclusivity really means and specifically why it matters in the fintech space. I'd love to get things started by hearing from Parilee and Roy. How do you see financial inclusiveness as a part of the mission of Bread and Petal Card? Parilee, we'll start with you.
Sure. So at Bread and at Alliance Data, we really focus on delivering the right payment product at the right time to the right customer. And that's core to everything we do. As Bread, we had built out split pay, a buy now, pay later product, and installment products to give consumers flexibility in how they pay, working closely with merchants and brand partners to deliver those experiences. And now as part of Alliance Data, we have an even broader payment set that we bring to market. If we only had one payment product available, one way to pay, we would miss out on the ability to serve a lot of consumers. Any kind of one payment product can miss out on 40% or more of consumers' needs. And we really focus on making sure that that right payment product at the right time is tailored to exactly what a consumer needs to have a responsible path forward. So to dive in a little bit more here, if you think about Bread's installments and buy now, pay later products, those really appeal to new to credit or budget conscious consumers, and we let them really match their payment and spread it out in a responsible way over time. If you think about our card products, they work for a diverse population, bringing loyalty and rewards into the mix to help consumers, again, really optimize. We then look run proprietary models on the back end that help us to match that consumer based on what they're spending at any particular point in time to the right payment product for them. And ultimately, our focus on delivering that right payment product at the right time has to be done in a transparent, easy to understand, consumable UX. And so when we think about, the topic of this panel, that's something that is near and dear to everything that we do and focus on in our design and in our products. Ultimately, that lets our merchant partners increase affordability of the products that they're selling to the consumers that they're trying to reach, increase the loyalty and brand affinity over time, and give consumers a responsible path forward to make the purchases that they're looking to make. So truly at the core of everything we do, the core of really our fundamental product offering, and excited to talk more about that as the panel goes on.
Excellent. Well, you basically stolen my job and just outlined the entire panel discussion for us here in the first 5 minutes. But thank you for that. Let's go ahead and kick it now over to Roy. Roy, same question to you. How do you see financial inclusiveness as part of your mission at Petal Card?
Yeah, the genesis of Petal Card in many ways is because of the need for financial inclusiveness, and creating access to credit is something that we felt was really important the existing system, the existing mechanisms that rely so heavily on credit scores alone mean that a lot of people get left behind. A lot of people just can't get that first step into it. And as a result, they're often left getting less good products, less good rates. They're paying more for their everyday needs, and that really has an impact on people's lives. And so with Petal, we innovated from the beginning something called cash flow underwriting, and we're really proud to be at the forefront of cash flow underwriting for consumers. And what that means is, well, a lot of our users who apply for a Petal card do have a credit score. A lot of our users may not have any credit score at all. They may have a thin credit score, which means that there's just not a lot of history for us to see on their previous uses of credit. They may have blemishes on their credit scores as well. And if we only looked at that, we would have to deny a lot more users for getting a Petal card. But because we look at somebody's cash flow as well, so users, as they're going through our process, are prompted and able to connect to their banking account. We're able to see that information, see the way that they are handling their finances, and that allows us to approve a lot more people. It allows us to be able to predict what levels of credit somebody can handle responsibly in a way that's way more accurate than we would get with a credit score alone. And as a result, to create more access to people and to create access for some people who would really have a hard time finding access otherwise. So it's very, very important to what we're doing, very important to Petal's mission.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, obviously at its core, financial inclusion is very simply bringing more people into the financial ecosystem, people who were excluded for any number of other reasons. And I think it's something that's obviously very near and dear to us at Finovate as well. We love to see just the size of the pool getting bigger. And one of the things that Fintech can do is really expand access to types of products, to types of customers who were prevented from getting it before. Eric, I'm guessing you've got a little bit you can speak to here. You work with dozens of fintechs in your role at CleverTap. What are some of the other areas in the fintech ecosystem that you're seeing that are currently very focused on expanding access to financial services?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's particularly impactful from my point of view, given my background at BlackRock in product strategy, where we really only targeted high net worth clients. But really what I've seen at CleverTap, working with, and it's not just small fintech products, but even banks like TD Bank, right? Across the board, financial institutions and fintech companies are trying to include other demographics that have not historically been included, right? The idea is based on the product, which demographic are we really trying to target, right? So for a TD Bank, it's really trying to open access to that mobile banking strategy where the older generations, Y, et cetera, who are a little bit older, who are very familiar with the traditional banking method, are really trying to drive them into the mobile app to maybe drive direct check deposits, right? Mobile check deposits, to drive that down and really open up access to the banking system through mobile, right? Versus something like a Robinhood or a Current, who's really trying to target and educate these younger millennials and Generation Z users who may not be so financially literate to access the securities markets, right? Now, the idea here isn't just who are we targeting and who are we trying to include, right? But how are we going to get them to be adept and comfortable within our platforms, right? So I think the inclusivity is a broad theme right now that everyone's trying to do, especially with crypto coming around, that people of all ages are really jumping into. But how do we start to create a product that seems intuitive and compelling enough for these different demographics that have such varying levels of familiarity or comfortability, right, within these products? So I think that's where something really leveraging your data to better understand your customers, right? Whether it's your target customers or finding out that you have a surprise demographic in there, but really driving that data-driven culture to understand who your customers are, and then start to develop your strategy as far as ongoing education for those millennials who need ongoing education around what securities are, right? Or the really strong comprehensive onboarding for some of the older demographics who may not know how to leverage some of these mobile apps, right? So the inclusivity is a theme that I see across the board. What's interesting to me is how these companies start to target these demographics and the levers that they pull in order to drive that usage.
Sure. Yeah, and I think an interesting point that you raised here as well, really from a bank standpoint, and in the early days when you hear people talking about financial inclusion, it was more from kind of like a charity standpoint, more from the idea of, wouldn't the world be a better place if we had more people involved, which of course is true. Like that's obvious on its face. But at the same time, there is a very selfish motivation on the parts of financial institutions to engage, because you're talking about, in a very literal sense, expanding their potential customer base, which is something which I think every financial institution wants. It's something which a lot of them struggle to do. And so you look at fintech as a means of potentially offering a lot more and reaching a lot more people with products that you maybe already have, or coming up with products that you think will do that job. So, this actually brings me to my next question. And Roy, I'm going to kick this one your way first. Obviously, it does seem like such an obvious market opportunity, financial inclusion, and kind of making the community bigger. Why is it only in the past couple of years that it's become a real focus in the fintech space?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question to think about. In our case, when we look at something like cash flow underwriting, and that notion that I described earlier of going beyond credit scores and being able to look at the transaction data and kind of how somebody's using their bank account data in order to really determine eligibility and responsible levels of credit usage. That's something that really became enabled by data innovations, technology innovations, and even some public policy innovations. Increasingly there's a move towards open banking, and I like to think it's similar to, I had a great experience at a doctor recently. I went to a new doctor at a new network, but they asked me if I wanted to get my medical records connected, and simply opting in meant that my doctor could go ahead and see what previous doctors had done, right? So I didn't have to kind of go through everything all over again. They had access to that, and increasingly in banking, with this open banking concept, your data as a consumer is yours, and you can connect that to others as well. And so for us, that's something that was made possible by technology. It's being made possible, obviously, by advances in data, but also that public policy shift. Increasingly, that's really good for the user. And so people are not locked in to where they've been before. They can find the best options, the best providers, and that data can be shared, and we can start innovating and doing really smart things with it.
Yeah, there are a lot of fun new toys to play with if you're a data scientist right now. There's a lot of interesting things that you can do. And it is kind of a golden age in terms of being able to see and really understand who your customers are. Parilee, I wanted to check in with you on this as well. I'm guessing you have some thoughts here too.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, this is one of the places where, as you think about Alliance Data's acquisition of Bread, we really have a 1 + 1 = 3 moment and model that's incredibly exciting for me as a product leader. Alliance Data fundamentally believes that every consumer deserves the opportunity to establish credit, that is an opportunity that we should be creating with responsible paths forward for consumers who are looking to make purchases. And our approach, I think, Roy, in a lot of ways is similar to what Petal's doing with granting lines that are manageable, right? Providing consumers the opportunity and ability to manage those payments, their spending power, and then gradually grow those lines with good payment behavior. One really interesting fact that Alliance Data has over the decades of lending experience is that about 2/3 of lower scoring cardholders significantly improved their bureau risk scores in the first 24 months after opening an account with Alliance Data. And with 1 in 7 US adults having an Alliance Data card product, that trove of decades of data is just incredibly interesting and empowering to the products we can build with it. For us also, that buy now, pay later product is a key component of how you build that grow and expand strategy, so that we can offer low lines for responsible purchases to consumers who are newer to credit, and then grow our relationship with them over time. In addition to our on-us data that I've talked a little bit about, Alliance Data has also been a longtime proponent of alternate data sources and is constantly testing commercially available scores to protect our consumers, to serve broad spectrums of consumers, especially young consumers who are likely to be on or underbanked, and then deliver strong approval rates, but with that right credit line that enables somebody in responsible ways. And ultimately what that all points back to is, I think, everybody's goal in the lending ecosystem, right? We want fair, profitable, and responsible lending because that's what does right by consumers, and that's also what ultimately expands the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think it's important to recognize that you can do this in a way that's very safe and responsible because of the data that you have. You can really, again, zero in on customers on an individual level. We have a company who has been on stage at Finovate a couple of times called Neener Analytics, who's won some Best of Show trophies. And their big thing is, what if you could just ask every customer, are you going to pay us back? Because that's really what the credit process boils down to. It's that simple question, are you going to pay us back? So we've heard a little bit about some of the types of products that you can offer because of the changes and the new advancements in fintech. Let's kind of talk about the next step, because obviously having the product is one thing. Getting people to actually use it is something else altogether. And as you guys are aware, I'm sure this can be a real challenge. There's any number of barriers to adoption, and you can have the best product in the world, but it won't matter if it's kind of sitting in a box gathering dust somewhere. So how do you make it accessible and make sure that customers are actually using it responsibly, and maybe thinking about even providing guardrails to make sure customers are using new technologies in ways that advance their own best interests? When you give somebody a new tool, you can't necessarily control what they're going to be able to do with it. So Parilee, I'd like to start with you on this one and talk to you about guiding consumers to the right payment products, and helping them to figure out where they individually should be in your product suite.
Yeah, great question, Greg. And this is honestly one of the things that really drew me to Bread 3.5 years ago when I joined the company, was this place and positioning that Bread has at the point of sale, right? Deeply integrated with our merchant partners to bring into that shopping journey, into that consumer's existing browsing behavior, awareness of their purchasing power. And so by being deeply integrated throughout the shopping journey, so that when somebody starts browsing at a merchant, discovers that merchant is then able to show consumers their purchasing power, the amounts that they're pre-qualified for, what payment products are available to them, and then to really continue that journey as they're shopping and browsing and deciding which products to buy. It is an ability to get in front of the consumer and build that awareness in journeys and experiences that they're already doing every day. If you think for a minute about a recent college graduate, for example, who maybe has moved to a big city with their first job, has their apartment with 4 or 5 other roommates. Maybe they've been lucky enough that they can, leverage somebody's parents' hand-me-down furniture, but they're looking to make that place a home, right? That consumer might be looking and browsing and on Instagram, on different merchants' websites, dreaming about what they want to do with their apartment. And let's say they end up on one of our merchants, and maybe there's, the couch that they can't afford and shouldn't be buying right now, but they do see also the throw pillows. And even, those throw pillows and those accent pieces can be exciting and aspirational. And you can think about that person for that purchase being a great fit for our split pay, our buy now, pay later product, where they can pay in full, match to their next couple of paydays, in an interest-free way that will let them, afford that purchase that's a bit of a splurge for them. And then at the same time, you can think about that same consumer coming back a few years later, now that they're ready to buy that dream couch. And maybe they've developed a deep relationship with that brand because of that initial purchase, right? That lifestyle brand, that home goods brand is now kind of a core part of how they think about how they shop, because of that positive first experience that got them in the door. We've now added on to that awareness of their repayment behavior, maybe multiple purchases over time. And it means that when they're ready to make that next purchase, whether it's a big purchase, they're buying a couch or buying a bed, or repeat smaller purchases where they're looking for loyalty benefits and rewards. We have that relationship with them. The brand has that relationship with them, and we can bring those both together to continue to tailor what we offer. So maybe that next purchase, an installment loan is the right one for them, and we're able to use both the data we have and what they're shopping for, and the great experience and great relationship they've built to ultimately deliver that installments product. Or again, if they're looking for repeat purchases over time, our card products, private label and co-brand, can help them access loyalty and rewards programs that keep them coming back to that brand that they've built affinity for and loyalty to. So that journey, right? That start low, grow your line, grow your relationship, grow it with the brand, grow it with your financing partner, and then using what we know to make sure that we're delivering the right product at the right time to the right consumer, ultimately puts us in a position at point of sale to make sure that consumers know their options and feel empowered to buy the product that's right for them and pay for it in the right way.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned buying a couch, because that's one of the first purchases I made when I was really looking at credit initially. Now, I will say you may be painting a slightly unrealistic version of the just graduated from college crowd looking at the fancy new couch. I guess it depends heavily on your background. I was probably more likely to get the tournament quality foosball table and get the couch off of Craigslist. But either way, there's something that you want there, right, as you first come into it. And there's something that you need to be able to establish some credit for. You need to be able to, you do have an aspirational purchase. When you're 22, you're looking, how can I set up this house? How can I make it a home? And these are really important questions to consider. Roy, talk to us a little bit about Petal's approach to customer financial health. You heard Parilee kind of mention it a little bit, but what are you guys doing that's kind of focusing on this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities in kind of our general feelings here. So, I talked earlier about how creating access is really important. And, we're a very mission-driven company, and we feel a lot of responsibility, especially when we're creating access. And we have a lot of users who are new to credit, building their credit, and making them successful with these products is extremely important. And so a lot of what we do in our financial product, but also the digital experience around it, lines up towards that of how do we help users become successful with these products. On our Petal 2 card, our higher end credit card offering, users can go up in their reward tiers, the amount of cash back they're getting. And that's not based on how much they're spending, which might be a more traditional approach in the credit card space. For us, it's about their payment behavior. So the more they exhibit responsible usage of the card, the rewards go up. And our incentives are aligned, right? We want our users to be successful long-term. And so we're going to show them the path to do that a little more radically. A great example of something that we just released recently is a feature we're really proud of called Leap. And Leap allows a user to see the path, not just to go to higher cashback rewards, but also clear path for getting a credit limit increase. And so for our eligible users, we tell them exactly what they need to do. And it's around the same concepts of making sure that you're exhibiting healthy financial behaviors. So paying on time, paying a large enough percentage of your bill on time, making sure that you don't have credit score problems elsewhere. And we'll show somebody a path. You follow those steps over 6 months and get a credit limit increase. And that's really, really powerful for users. And it's showing them the way to use it responsibly. And so it's had great user feedback in the short time it's been live, because people now know what they need to do and what they need, how they get to that next step. So that's a really important aspect for us of just really making people successful.
Yeah, no, and I really love hearing stories like that. You love to be able to see that kind of linear progression between customers engaging in this very concrete reinforcement. Your credit actually is getting better. Your credit limit is going up. These are really important things to see. And it's so validating for people who are new to credit, who are, maybe, or have some blemishes in their past, to be able to see this progression and see progress being made. Eric, can you talk to us about the importance of proper onboarding and user education when it comes to using these apps in a way that will kind of get you that responsible result?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of this is historically, especially in Fintech, but really across the financial institution, and you'd have something through it, right? Because historically, the financial sector was fairly complicated. As right, we're getting rid of those advisors and those salespeople who are in front of you, and now we have to find a way to replace that digitally, right? With a comprehensive onboarding campaign, with ongoing education that's going to teach you about these products that you want to invest in, right? That's trying to more demographics into this financial sector and open up these products to them that are historically been a bit obscure, right? Whether it's credit, right? Growing up with credit, like I didn't even know how to fix my credit. I thought the longer I keep the loan, the better. And even now I'm like, was that the right move, right? So even with, investing in securities, that's something that has been an incredibly tough task because you're trying to a human advisory element and turn it into a digital component, right? All in maybe 5 steps, right? And so I think that's where onboarding is so incredibly important, where as we try to open up these markets to them, and we drive them into these mobile apps or these internet websites, really helping them understand exactly what to do and feel confident doing it without having an expert by your side saying, hey, this is exactly what you should do, right? Because we're essentially giving them guide rails and then letting them go and kind of play in this playground, where historically there might have been someone actually walking them step by step, right? And so I think there is a double-edged sword here of really opening up the inclusivity to everyone, while still making sure that they know enough to actually navigate these environments intelligently, right? Rather than just kind of taking a bunch of like children and then throwing them into the New York Stock Exchange and saying, have fun, right? So to your point and to Roy and Parilee's point, right? Really, a lot of people are able to kind of access these tools to increase their credit. But I think to their point, really helping them understand how to do that and which products are right to increase their credit or help them move in a certain way, a certain financial direction, right, is going to be increasingly important in not only getting the customers to use your platform, but in building that trust so they continue to use that year over year, right? An example, Robinhood versus Stash versus some of these other securities investment platforms, right? They all aim to make investment easier. The one that you stick with is the one that allows you to see which securities seem to be most appropriate for what you're trying to do, and then allows you to invest and honestly just see it grow comfortably, right? Just seeing your money grow isn't enough. Understanding why and how it grows, right, is going to be the responsibility for a lot of these products. So yeah, I think the onboarding piece is, again, really crucial to any financial platform, given that it's going to take the place of 2, 3, 4 employees that you may have hired internally to vet and walk people through this process.
Yeah, no, and I will say, obviously we've seen some examples where we have seen essentially children coming into the stock market and making decisions based off of what a Reddit board says. And it's fun to watch. It's very entertaining, but that is not the path to long-term financial success. And that's not the path, I think, to keeping people engaged with their finances in a way that will ultimately be productive for them in the long term. A little bit of help, as much as it might pain us to say, well, that gives us something less fun to watch, we say, well, ultimately, this is about getting people into a position where they need to be. And so, I think you're spot on here. Getting people the support that they need is really important, and making sure that that everybody in your organization is aware of the tools that your bank is offering, that your company is offering, so that people can get that support that they need. Let's take it from a slightly different tack here and talk about consumer research, because obviously this is something that a lot of people spend a huge amount of time on as well, trying to understand where your consumers are coming from. Parilee, can you start by talking about some of the research you're doing at Bread, about how you guys are making sure you understand what your customers' needs really are?
Absolutely. And both qualitative and quantitative consumer research are core to our product process at Bread and at Alliance Data. And I think one thing that was really jumping out at me, Roy and Eric, to what you were just speaking to is just how important clear, usable experiences are for consumers in financial products, right? Money can be scary and it can be intimidating. And if you think about being afraid and intimidated, that's not how you make your best decisions as a consumer. And when we think about, responsible lending, responsible payments, which are, core to what all of us are here to speak about and work on, being able to empower consumers with the right information that's digestible and understandable is how you build those products that then ultimately empower rather than intimidating. And, we are at times our own sample demographic, at times representative, and at times not representative of the populations we're looking to really bring into the financial sector with our products. And that's where research comes in. At Bread, hiring in a research team onto our design team was a core priority of ours because of just how important we think qualitative and quantitative tools are. We leverage everything from shop-alongs and generative research to more quantitative surveys to consumers, to non-consumers. We do anonymized research. We do branded research. We do them ourselves. We do research through others. We look at market data and competitive insights. But ultimately what we're looking to get and build as a product team, and I think what all of us look to build as product leaders, is our empathy and awareness of what problems our consumers have, what they're looking to solve, and then what communication, what experiences, what interfaces make sense and help consumers get the understanding that they need to be empowered and make the right decisions for them. And so, really putting kind of that full research toolkit to work, making sure that we're building that empathy and awareness and understanding, and then testing and testing again everything that we bring to market to constantly improve clarity, to constantly improve usability, and constantly improve consumer empowerment is core to what we do as product teams and as product leaders.
Sure. No, I think that's great. It makes a lot of sense as well. A quick note, we are at about the halfway point here for the webinar. We will be taking some questions from the audience as we get to the last 15 minutes or so. So if you, as you're watching, have questions you want to ask our panelists, you can go ahead and put them into the Q&A box down below. We'll be taking those, as I said, in about 15 minutes or so. I'd like to skip ahead now and talk about UI, because obviously that's a really crucial piece here as well. The way that the user actually engages with the new technology is so crucial. Roy, can you talk a little bit about how Petal Innovations, you kind of put the consumer in charge of their own financial health and kind of the user interface that you guys have to make that really easy and intuitive for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all comes back again to that notion of how do we make people successful with the product. And make sure that we're doing what's in their best interests. So somewhat counterintuitively, one of the features that we offer on the card is functionality to help a user set what their spend plan is. And so we have users telling us, here's how much I I want to spend a month, like no more than, let's say, $1,500, and they can set that. And in our UI in the app, they're able to see how their spending is going towards that target. And so they may have a higher credit limit than that, so they could spend more, but they're able to track themselves and save it and kind of get confidence in using the card responsibly. And a lot of this work we do comes based on user research, right? So there's a lot of quantitative data, and I think that's often what a lot of product teams are most comfortable with, is using the quantitative data and being able to measure everything and see kind of where the facts take them. And increasingly in fintech, I think the qualitative data is also really important. And Parilee was talking about this, and I think it's really important. There's a lot of emotions that come with personal finances, right? It can be intimidating, it can be scary, and there's somewhat that difference in when you're in school and you learn about theoretical economics and behavioral economics. There's what might be exactly rational and logical for things, but then there's how people actually behave and how they feel about things. And so a lot of our user research, we want to get that quantitative. We want to see what's going on and how people are doing things and what mathematically makes sense. But we recognize that people are people, and we want to hear from them and hear their emotions. And so as part of it, I described earlier that new Leap feature that we're really excited about that shows the user the path to a credit limit increase. And a big reason that UI came about the way it did is because we could hear the emotions in people when they talked to us about credit limits. It wasn't just the rational, more higher credit limit could mean a higher credit score, which opens up other doors. There's also a really emotional part to it. We could hear users talk about, the need to take their family to see their grandparents, and that can be an expensive expenditure. And when your credit limit gets in the way, there's a lot of emotions in that. And it can be really frustrating when you don't know how to get from here to there, right? So, all right, so my credit limit's not high enough. Well, how do I get it? And there can be even more frustrations if the user has the wrong idea of what it takes to get there, and maybe does things that they think are helping them that actually aren't helping them. And so a lot of what happens in the traditional financial, consumer financial space is black boxes to users. And so one of our hopes is to make things as much transparent as possible. And that really gets to that inclusivity and leveling the playing field. Everybody has the roadmap here. And so, that's a big part of where we built that leap feature. We can just say, hey, this is not a black box, guessing and finding out the wrong way. It's accessible to everybody. Here are the rules, and you follow these steps, and you've got your increase in your path to a better financial situation.
No, there's a reason that economics is considered a social science at most universities and colleges around the country. And it's because it is fundamentally about human beings. And as much as we sometimes inside the fintech bubble, it's easy to forget that. It's easy to look at the numbers. It's easy to look at, and I think a lot of us are going to draw into this space because you have maybe slightly more analytic viewpoints and think very logical. Well, of course, if you do this, then X, Y, and Z is going to follow on from that. But it's very worth remembering that people out there in the wild, so to speak, don't necessarily think of it in that way. And to really look at them as individuals and kind of factor in that emotional side can be really difficult to do. So we've talked a little bit about obviously kind of setting the stage and talking a little bit through some of the best practices. We're going to get to a quick discussion about what's coming. But before we do, I want to just come back to Eric and kind of check in, because I think that there are a number of places where you can see fintechs potentially struggling with some of the pieces that maybe Parilee or Roy have been talking about here. Where do you see the key pitfalls, those key struggle areas for fintechs as they kind of try and find that path forward to inclusivity for their customers?
Yeah, and honestly, in this discussion, I see a lot of the same pitfalls in fintech that I see across verticals, especially as they become more digital. A lot of the concerns are very similar, right? How do we keep people engaged, right? How do we drive specific usage of certain features that we think will make them more financially literate or more comfortable within our platform? And so what I find is that it's not so much that, hey, it's specific to fintech or specific to teach them how to build their credit or how to drive certain securities, while that is a big part of the platform. But internally, it's about really understanding how to become more data-driven in terms of understanding how your users are navigating through the platform, identifying specific leading indicators of whether power usage or churn, right? So one example when I was working with TD Bank is really understanding how can we drive people to do the remote check deposits within their mobile app, right? Because that really drives down their internal cost. But before we came in, what they were really doing is hey, should we just send them emails and just hopefully, right? If we send emails out to everyone and we send them push notifications, they'll see the push and they'll actually go in and use the tool. But really what we were trying to find is for the people who actually leverage the remote check deposit, what are their previous behaviors? What are their previous behavioral patterns look like? So now we can try to emulate and really try to drive that kind of behavioral pattern across as many of users as possible and really getting the lowest hanging fruit, right? So while we're talking about fintech, I would say this is kind of a product strategy as a whole, where rather than just saying, hey, this is a feature that we want to drive, send this out to everyone, kind of like a billboard advertisement, right? Just show everyone and someone's going to use it. Really understanding how are people getting there? And if they're not getting there intuitively, which levers can we pull to get them to that mark, right? So if we have a specific North Star, right? In your case, it might be doing some action that will drive credit, like making a purchase but doing installments, right? Really understanding, okay, for the people who did leverage the installment portion, right? They seem to come from this demographic and they seem to have come from this attribution source, et cetera. So really take into account so many different factors that aren't even related to their financial security or their financial status to better understand who these users are, and then of course target them accordingly, right? Whether it's change their product, so a kind of push-pull motion, right? First identifying who the users are by data, and then by leveraging that data, understanding whether it's more effective to pull the user in by allocating resources to product and making it a more intuitive interface, right? Or pushing them by targeting them with notifications, et cetera, at the right time, both of which are starting to become a product focus, right? Whereas historically it was just a UI, I'd say product is becoming more and more involved in how do we reach out to them, right? So yeah, I know that it's a broad topic, but I think that, again, as fintech becomes more digital, you'll start to see product managers from a number of different verticals coming into fintech, right? To drive their expertise in e-commerce and drive their expertise in social media apps, because it's very similar to how do we get people to refer a customer into the social media app, right? You take that kind of data analysis and you bring it to fintech and you say, okay, well, we really need referrals and our customer acquisition cost is still astronomically high in finance especially, right? How do we really leverage this data to maximize that lifetime value, right? Pardon all the jargon that I'm throwing in there or the buzzwords, but really, again, just becoming a more data-driven organization, I think is a crux of a lot of the struggles that I see within any of these product teams.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of pieces there that actually sound relatively straightforward when you kind of lay them out in that way. And I think there are some buzzwords in there, but those buzzwords exist for a reason, right? And I think this is one of those areas where they can be really helpful. Parilee, did you want to chime in here as well?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think just one thing I'd kind of highlight on what Eric was saying is really this data-driven targeting, right? And kind of back to our mission of the right product at the right time for the right consumer, that has to be heavily data-driven. But then you do have to factor in the complexity of being in a highly regulated space that is regulated to protect consumers. And so as we think about, radical inclusivity, and really this goal of serving the un or underbanked and how we extend access and extend purchasing power. It's also really important that we're doing that with bright line compliance approaches, and that we're making sure that we're protecting consumers along the way, because I think that whether that's protecting them from identity theft, or helping to make sure that they're in, the right payment product for them that's appropriately sized to their situation. You want to do that always with, the good of the consumer in mind. And so I think it's that ability to pull data, but also, keep the consumers good front and center. That is core to a lot of, what we all are solving in the market. And is one of the additional complexities that comes with being in fintech versus in social media, even as we do kind of look to other products out there to drive our thinking and strategies.
Yeah, no, it's one of the real challenges in the fintech space, of course, is that consumers' expectations are set by companies who don't have to worry about that kind of regulatory side of things, that compliance side of things. And so they bring those expectations into their financial provider, and it can be a lot more difficult to get that same experience because of some of the hurdles that exist in finance that don't exist when it comes to social media or things like that. I'd like to, we're coming up on the end of our time, and I do see a couple questions coming into the Q&A box here. So there's time still to ask a couple more if there's anybody who wants to get in there. I'd like to kind of finish off this by turning towards the future and looking at, how we can expect to see the space evolve over the coming months. Obviously, none of us have a crystal ball. None of us are going to be able to predict some of the, big scale things that may impact, you can tell I'm kind of gun shy because I last asked this question, in 2019 on a panel, and we were all just so wrong about everything. But I am curious to hear your guys' thoughts on what you expect to see in the coming months and years. Parilee, I'll start with you.
Sure, and in a lot of ways that ties back to what Eric was speaking to about really use of data to drive personalization, and then ultimately, use of that data to drive personalization to drive consumer benefit. And when I look at kind of some of the most interesting trends in fintech to me, as well as more broadly in tech in general, but it really is that. As we are able to learn more about consumers, about their preferences, about their intent, and about, the right products for them, how do we then, use what we know from qualitative research, from quantitative research, driven out of ML models, to help provide the right products for consumers, and make sure that we have the right things on the shelf and the right guidance to those products. So really that's, one of the trends I'm watching closely that we're very focused on as a product team is that use of data, on us data, industry data, and consumer specific data in responsible ways, to help create better experiences and to make sure that we are guiding consumers to that right payment product for them.
Excellent. No, I think that's great. Roy, same question over to you.
Yeah, future trends. I'm going to double down on this data theme here, actually. And Greg, you said it before, great time to be a data scientist. Pandemic aside, I'm fairly confident in this big trend here of there's a lot of data out there. The hard part increasingly is creating real insights from data, right? Companies, every financial institution, every bank is sitting on a ton of data, and then it's how do you drive that data into insights that empower things for our users. I'll talk about Petal for a second. We invested a lot into this cash flow underwriting, right? These machine learning models to look at all this data that every bank has around its users' behaviors and be able to, from that, be able to articulate a score to say what's the responsible amount of credit this person can handle. And that's a huge amount of data science work, machine learning, to be able to look at those in those many data points and come out with that score. And because of our mission of really opening up access, one of the kind of bold decisions we made recently is we are now turning to the rest of the industry and making that same proprietary model that has created that access for us, and we're now extending that to others. So we launched prismdata.com, and we're talking to a lot of other people in the fintech space about how they can take that data, whether it's first party data of their users on their site, or if it's through the aggregators and kind of this open banking, but being able to take that data that they have and then create the actual insights to say, what can I expect from this user, and how can I offer them the best products and experiences? So I think that's a big trend, is taking all that data and then not getting lost in it, right? And actually creating actionable insights.
Yeah, and that's a real challenge. I think obviously there's so much data that's available, making sense of it, sifting through it all. And of course, there were data scientists out there. I know some who looked at what happened in the past year and were thinking to themselves, now we're going to get some real data, right? This has been one of those things that people have been kind of looking at. The data that we had collected was all sort of, boom time, growth times, everything's going fine. And so you kind of knew in the back of your mind, there's this actually big hole in the data that we have. It's heavily skewed. What happens when there's a shock to the system? Now, obviously, we have a ton more data, and trying to make sense of all that and combine it and integrate it with the other data that we may have already been collecting can be a real challenge. But there's a big prize there for people who are able to do that well. Eric, I'll conclude by giving you the kind of closing word here before we jump into some of our audience questions. What do you see the future in this space looking like over the next couple of months or years?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to Roy and Parilee's part, again, just to kind of hammer in the point around the data, as these companies become more and more specialized, right, their data is going to become very specialized. And with that data, what I'm seeing a lot more of is, and I hesitate to use the word predictive, right, but the machine learning component, and really understand the correlations between these users' actions so you can better serve up these appropriate recommendations of products to them, right, before they even look at it. So it is somewhat predictive, but again, I just hesitate to use that right now. But I think for tech-first companies, right, especially like credit companies, banking companies that are mobile only, right, we're going to see a lot of this really advanced, more predictive machine learning type of analysis going on, right, especially as these platforms and as they get much more data. Having said that, something that I did want to touch on briefly is there's a very big difference between these mobile-first companies and these traditional banks. Right, so with these mobile-first companies, what I see a lot is, hey, the base analytics we got, but where can we really drive the boundaries of machine learning? Where can we really push the boundaries of this predictive analytics? Versus banks, where I think right now what you're going to see is a better cohesion of their all their different data sets, right? Because at the moment, really what they're trying to work on, what I'm seeing is how do we incorporate the bank data, the brick and mortar data, with our digital data to better understand how users are navigating between these two different platforms, right? Whether you're actually going into the bank or going to the mobile app. And then from there, being able to find a more natural synergy between the two, right? Now, I know they want to push more people to the mobile apps, but the brick and mortar locations will always kind of have a role there. So I think depending on the type of company you are, we're going to see slightly different trends in terms of how you leverage your data and how you use that data to serve your customer, right? So Parilee and Roy may use their data in vastly different ways than maybe what like a TD Bank or Bank of America might do, just because of their sophistication and their access to more kind of cohesive digital data versus having to stitch together so many different platforms and sources, right? So I think depending on where you are, we'll see a little bit different stuff. But again, all of it is coming together to create a more comprehensive picture of who the user is now. And then to Roy's point, really investing in those algorithms to understand who that user is going to be right? And of course, Roy's at the cutting edge here, so we'll see, maybe Bank of America are coming, catching up. But again, depending on where you are in this digital transformation stage, right, you'll start to see them take that next step, right?
Sure. No, I mean, obviously the importance of data is key. I think one of the things that I just wanted to throw out there as well from my own standpoint is I think you're going to see more and more users taking control over their own data and really being kind of aware of what their data says. And, we've seen this with open banking. We talked about it a little bit earlier on, but obviously there's data that exists within a bank, but there's going to be more and more, I think, of users having their own data, understanding what that data means, hopefully getting some help, some education from somewhere else, and the ability to, now that you've got this, how do you use it wisely? I think that's going to be another really interesting piece to watch out for as well. And we'll see what happens. Obviously, some pretty different regional ways that people are engaging with this. Open banking looks very different in Europe than in North America at the moment, but it'll be fascinating to watch that as well. So let's turn our attention now to some of the questions that have come in from the audience. And Eric, the first one is for you. So you spoke about the importance of onboarding. What are some keys to successful onboarding when it comes to the fintech space?
Yeah, I get this question quite a bit. And when I talk with my team, obviously this is something that's pretty important because when you kind of give a pitch or when you're talking about how to implement, you have to understand the specific milestones or metrics that the product team or the marketing team leverages. This is a difficult question to answer given that each product is so unique in the metrics and the KPIs they monitor, right? Parilee versus Roy, I'm sure they may have certain KPIs that might be similar, but there will be so many KPIs that are so radically different despite being in a very similar space, right? And then you go into banking, they're going to be entirely different, right? So I think rather than understanding which KPIs or milestones you should be looking at, right, really understand what that North Star is for you, right? And again, the North Star doesn't have to be the revenue generating event, right? So for a bank, it might not be that they're actually paying a bill, but it could be something that you understand is a leading indicator, right? So if we notice that someone makes 5 deposits in a month, and those users are more likely to then, do auto bill pay, right? Really understanding in that onboarding process, how do we drive that sort of behavior, right? So while the onboarding is trying to make them comfortable within the platform as a whole, really understanding what that North Star is and understanding what that path of those leading indicators are, and really focusing heavily on that in the beginning to get them to accomplish that power user action. And then you can start to federate them into the rest of the platform, right? But I think that's going to be the key is first understanding what that North Star is. I think that's what, I wouldn't say a lot of product teams, but product teams that I see struggle kind of falter at first, right? They don't have that North Star. So when they go into the onboarding piece, because we're moving backwards almost, right? And they're like, oh, how do we get people onboarded and then how do we get them to do that? But if we really think about what is it that we're trying to get them to do, and now how do we onboard them to get them to that location, right? You see a much more effective onboarding process and a much more efficient user once they're actually in the platform, right? So rather than saying, hey, here's everything, do this very well. And once you have that, you'll see the value of the platform, and then we can move on to the other features. Right.
Sure. So another one that just came in actually as you were speaking there. So I think this one's going to be more for Parilee and Roy. How do leaders identify their North Star from a product strategy perspective? I think that's obviously a crucial piece of what you were saying, Eric, and I'm really curious to hear Parilee and Roy what you guys think. And we'll go Roy first. I think we've done Parilee first all the time, so Roy, you get to take this one first.
Yeah, a lot of this comes down to a combination of listening to our users and understanding what their needs are. There are a lot of frameworks that product leaders use to understand users' needs. We don't strictly use it, but there's like a jobs to be done framework, for example, that's really helpful in understanding, what's your user trying to do. There's an aspect too of understanding, the business's goals, right, and what we're trying to do, from our selfish kind of growing our business perspective, and then kind of where the market is. And often the North Star comes at the intersection of these things. Of what do we do that solves user problems in a way that is differentiated from the industry and helps us hit our goals. And so, Eric, I really like what you were talking about there when you talk about the North Stars. For us, a lot of the North Stars that we use on our product team are around getting users successful with our card. And so we want to see users, and it's one of the jobs to be done. One of the reasons people get a Petal card is because they want to grow their credit. And so we want them to be successful. We want to bring them on that path. And we do see that, users who use autopay, for example, and pay their credit card bill with autopay with us, are more likely to then be successful and to see their credit score go up and their access to other products go up. And so that's one of the things that in our onboarding we're going to try really hard, and we're going to use all of the design principles and the product management principles that we know to really help users understand and encourage them to set that up from the beginning, because then they'll be successful down the road. So I think it's exactly like you said, Eric, of kind of starting about there. What do we want the user to do? To us, that kind of North Star is around their success and their personal financial success, working backwards from there and figuring out, what do we need them to do in that onboarding process, such as in our case, setting up that payment behavior from the very beginning before you even use the card.
I like that answer, but you have to take away points for your insinuation that there can be multiple North Stars. I feel like that's maybe playing slightly fast and loose with the terms of the question there, but we won't come down on you too hard for it. Parilee, how about you? How do you identify your North Star from a product strategy standpoint?
Yeah, and I actually agree strongly with a lot of what Roy said there. To me, it's about bringing together what are your business and financial objectives. What are you hearing from consumers in the market? And then what are you seeing happen in the market? And as you kind of look at those three, you're able to identify ultimately the pain points that you want to solve and you want to be the best in the world at solving. So I think that kind of combination is ultimately what drives to that definition of the one or couple of core metrics that you are most focused on. And I do think personally for me, and as I've done consumer research over the years and over my product career, one of the core things that I look out for, whether it's a feature or a new product, is looking for where consumers have crafted their own workaround of the system, whether that's like the spreadsheet that they have that they're really proud of, where they can show you kind of all these things they're doing to, solve for a product that doesn't exist yet, or the sticky notes, or the whiteboard. But consumers are incredibly good at solving problems that are real and painful problems for them. And at the same time, those are often inefficient and sometimes places that, a great product can help solve better. And so that's, one key thing as I think about maybe less North Star, but more new products and new features. Or, as we do consumer research to identify what are the places, for example, that we want to improve our onboarding. That's one of the key triggers I'm always looking for is, where have people had to create a workaround? Because ultimately I don't want somebody to have to create a workaround for the products we're building. I want the product to be their solution. And I think that's a great way to identify pain points that then kind of tie back into what you do in onboarding or other parts of your journey.
Yeah, certainly the people being incredibly proud of their own Excel spreadsheets is something which is a blessing and a curse, right? You want them to have that ownership, but at the same time, I'm thinking, well, do you really need to be doing that in Excel? Is there really not a way that we can get it out there? So we are in the closing minutes here. We have just about 30 seconds for each of you to just kind of give one closing thought, one important takeaway for everybody listening here today. Something that it can be kind of just summarizing something that you said earlier. But what's kind of your closing thought here? And I'll start with you, Roy. Remember, just 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, I think the real opportunity here, the real excitement of the stuff that we do is the opportunity to just fight hard for our users, right? To fight to make things fair and simple and take complex things and make them easy and simple. And I think that's kind of the real opportunity here, and using all these tools, the data, the analytics, all these different pieces to make it happen. It's a really exciting time to be in this field.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. Parilee, over to you. Closing thought.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Roy, that it's an incredibly exciting time to be in fintech. As you look at the convergence of, UX and best-in-class UX with, all of the access to data that we've all been speaking to and the ability to use that with, new financial products that are deeply integrated into existing consumer journeys. That all ties back to ultimately our ability to create products that solve problems for real humans. And so as I think about the opportunities to do that in fintech, I think they are racing forward, and it's just an incredibly exciting time to be part of that journey. So really appreciate the panel today and the chance to speak a little bit to you all about that.
Excellent. Thank you, Parilee. And then Eric, go ahead and bring us home.
Yeah, sure. Just to kind of pair it, Roy and Parilee, it is an absolutely incredible time to be in fintech, right? Which is why you see kind of these point solutions pop up to address very important topics that they can specialize in, right? And to that point, I think as you start to get more specialized, really leaning on that data to better understand who your users are, because again, you're coming in with a preconceived notion. So if there's one thing I would say is Netflix started the whole data-driven trend, right? They're incredibly sophisticated in data, but that should be across every company now, right? So if you're trying to make a product decision, right, and you don't have the data to back it up, that's just like a shot in the dark, right? So if I was to say one thing moving forward, right, and this just goes back to better use of data and cohesion, when you're trying to make your product strategy, and clearly Parilee and Roy do this quite a bit, right? Leverage that data, dig inside data, and if you don't have the data to back up what you're trying to do, dig harder, right? Because again, right now, given how competitive it is, without that data to back it up to say, this is why I'm doing it, right? Yeah, I mean, you're starting several steps back, right? So I'd say just as you move forward, data. And I think that's one of the reasons why Parilee and Roy are so successful right now is given their investment that they've talked about in that data component, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. And this has been a really fun panel for me as well. I certainly hope everybody watching and listening has enjoyed it. I've got a number of things that I'm taking away from this. It's been great to get the experiences of Parilee and Roy, and thank you to Eric and to CleverTap for sponsoring this. It's been a really fun panel. Again, my name has been Greg Palmer. It's been my pleasure hosting this. I certainly hope you took something away from this and look forward to catching you next time on our next Finovate webinar. Thank you guys so much.